So, folks, if you're not terrified of the potential human cost of a war with Iran, perhaps this will scare you a little bit. This is what we talk about when we talk about this just being absolutely disastrous. Iran parliament reportedly backs closing the Strait of Hormuz, which could spike oil prices. Oh, you don't say. Iran's parliament has endorsed closing the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil transit point off its coast, but analysts are skeptical about the threat from a body without authority to close the strait. Why it matters. Impeding the strait would likely bring a massive spike in oil prices that would flow through to U.S. consumers. The narrow channel between Iran and Oman is the choke point for a quarter of the world's seaborne oil trade, around 1/5 of all oil movements. Without diplomatic concessions from Tehran, the front-month Brent crude oil price could open meaningfully above its 77.01 per barrel Friday close, Clearview Energy Partners said in a Sunday note. The threat is among the initial responses to yesterday's U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Trying to block the strait would be the first time that the Israel-Iran conflict meaningfully affects global oil flows. Authority to do so rests with regime security officials and not with parliament. So here you could see, as a percentage of all of the oil flow, the Strait of Hormuz is the dark brown. Everything else is the beige. As the article mentions, that's about 20%, which creates quite the nightmare for just about everybody. Just about everybody. The U.S. is urging China to pressure Iran not to close the Strait of Hormuz, Marco Rubio told Fox News.
Final question here. Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. So, look, they're going to say what they need to say. You know, these are the things that need to happen for their own internal politics and so forth. But in the end, we're going to judge them by the actions that they take moving forward. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force. And that was the point of this mission. And that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate. We're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous. We have responses available that are devastating.
All right. So let's hear a little bit more about what the implications of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be. Hotspot found this video. I'm not sure who this woman is, but this seems like a good explanation. You know, she's a good-looking woman, you know, so it doesn't really matter who she is. If you have those looks, you could explain the Strait of Hormuz, and people are like, hey, I'm straight for this Hormuz. I can tell you that. So here we go. Here's the... let's hear more about
that. I'm going to feel that in the morning. That was rough.
Hormuz is one of the most geopolitically charged waterways on the planet. Empires fought for it, now global markets depend on it.
Yeah,
and
right.
at its narrowest point, it's only about 20 to 30 miles wide. Yet, 1/5 of the world's global oil supply flows through it daily. As you can see, there's Iran to the north, and there's the Musandam Peninsula to the south, which is a little exclave of Oman. It's quite tiny here on the map, but you have beady eyes, I've noticed, that juts out from UAE territory. So this narrow throat is the only maritime exit from the Persian Gulf, meaning that there's no other sea route for the vast energy exports of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. So it connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, to the Arabian Sea, and then if the whiteboard was massive, the Indian Ocean. So it's linking Asia, the Middle East, and the global economy.
She's not making this easy.
As you might guess, this strait has been contested for millennia by the early Alamites of ancient Iran, the first Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great, Portuguese naval powers, the Ottomans, the Safavids. They all were seeking to control this vital trade artery between East and West. And today, Iran holds tactical control of this northern coast. And just days
Iran controls the narrow throat of the Strait of Hormuz. That's what everybody needs to understand.
ago, a senior Iranian commander warned that Tehran was considering closing the strait in response to Israeli strikes. Iran correctly sees Hormuz as ultimate strategic leverage, not to strike Israel directly, but to pressure the global order. So if cornered by Israeli action or Western backing, it can threaten a blockade which would cripple oil markets and punish Israel's allies. So it would force the US, Europe, and the Gulf states to make a choice: pressure Israel to back down, escalate militarily, or absorb the economic pain.
So what she's saying is basically Iran's going to make it very hard to shoot the oil through the narrow throat of the Strait of Hormuz. That's what we all have to understand there. And in all seriousness, this is what we talk about. We talk about how this is going to be much worse than Iraq.
They have done some exercises that help to loosen the throat, though.
You can open the throat of Hormuz. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, look, I mean, this is part of what we talk about. We talk about how Iran is going to be much worse. If you thought Iraq was bad, and it was a horror, this is going to be much worse. Not only is it 4 times the population, but just look at what an action like this could potentially look at the havoc that this could sow throughout the world. Oil prices skyrocketing, inflation skyrocketing, scarcity, all kinds of interruptions, massive interruptions. You talk about 20% of the seabound oil. That's huge. That's huge. And Marco Rubio, well, we're going to see, hopefully China doesn't back this. I mean, look at the gamble you're taking. For what? For what? Actually, for what is the wrong question. It's for who? It's for Israel. Right. Look at what we're putting ourselves through for Israel. Look at what the consequence of this could be. This is before you put a boot on the ground. Before there's a single casualty. Look at what you have here.
Well, and now it's to the point that even if you take the mask off and you acknowledge the real politic motivation for sustaining this genocidal apartheid state in the middle of that region, that it's really about having a way to attack all of these oil-producing nations at will. The idea that we're deeply offended by Iran's treatment of women when we just did a massive arms sale to Saudi Arabia is a little rich. So even if you just get into the real politic of it, at this point, that doesn't even make sense anymore. You are so completely destabilizing the region to maintain this client state in that region, that it's hard to imagine that you wouldn't be strategically better off getting that thorn out of the side of that region and maintaining peaceful relations with the nations there. Like, how would that not be strategically better than trying to force this genocidal apartheid state on the region and on the world? Turkey is a NATO member. You have theoretically a place where you could strike from militarily as needed. Why do you need Israel? How does this still make strategic sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say they could be a potential aircraft carrier, but this is where the Clash of Civilizations narrative comes in. This is where
we just sent these bombers from Kansas City.
Yep, all the way over.
And they back, so you don't even need it.
Yeah,
you don't even need. If you can do that, you can bomb from anywhere in Europe. You got bases all over Europe. What do you need Israel for?
That's a good point. They made a big point of saying that these bombers left from Missouri. They didn't even take a fuel stop. Nothing. It just direct
and
flight.
They went back.
And they went back. They made it out and they went back.
So why do you need a base there? Why do you need an entire country that is a de facto, as RFK said, aircraft carrier in the region? If you can do that, why do you need Israel?
Well,
in what way is it worth destabilizing the region that way?
Well, that's where this comes in, right? Because
if
they're not necessary, then they'll make themselves necessary, if you know what I mean. right? Absolutely.
Please clap.